where people get back at those who've wronged them and lives are getting destroyed. And in today's lineup, we've got nasty bosses getting ruined, insurance scams backfiring, and one OP tells a story about the time someone messed with his kids and regretted it big time. The stories are so satisfying in this one, so sit back and relax, we're diving in. So here's some backstory. I work at a big ad agency with large companies as our clients. We expect to work in partnership with our clients, and we fire clients that treat us poorly. Usually, we treat each other with respect. With that said, our biggest client has 5 different teams we work with, and one of them was led by someone who I'll call Baseball Dad. Now, Baseball Dad is the type of idiot who gets wasted at his kids' baseball games and he starts heckling the other kids. He never approved any of our work, and he would put out awful stuff that his internal team made, even though he's literally paying us millions of dollars to make ads for him. His product was struggling to sell and he blamed us, even though we were killing it with the 4 other teams. He didn't know this, which comes back to bite him later. However, none of this is why we needed revenge. I couldn't care less if a client wants to fail. I collect my paycheck regardless. However, Baseball Dad crossed several lines. Number 1. The guy was extremely creepy and sexist. He used to call my female coworkers sweetheart in the most condescending voice. Not only that, he would comment on their clothes and bodies, and he would wink and smirk at me while they were talking, because we're both men, I guess. These women are highly accomplished, serious people, and they're like family to me. Huge misplay on his part. Number 2, Baseball Dad treated us like crap. He would constantly interrupt us, telling us to shut up and calling us vendors and remind us that he could fire us at any time. Number 3, Baseball Dad would always lie. He would tell his boss that we missed deadlines or forgot deliveries because he never checked his emails. We would then have to awkwardly struggle to prove Baseball Dad wrong without calling him a liar so we could keep the business. He never owned up to anything he said to us on the phone. Number 4. The final straw took place on a call between Baseball Dad and one of my project managers. I saw her run out of a room crying. She told me that Baseball Dad said to her on a one-on-one call that she should worry less about budgets and more about wearing that nice top that she wore at our last presentation. With that, cue revenge time. I told my boss that our team had enough of Baseball Dad. We were at our wits' end with this. Several of my coworkers were looking for new jobs because they could no longer stand how he was treating them. It's hard to hire good people, so my boss asked me to give her a day to figure things out. She wanted to lose Baseball Dad without the entire business. The next day, she shows up with our IT guy, who sets up a voice recording on our conference line. Where I live, it's illegal to record people without consent in my state. But Baseball Dad was late to every single call, which is too bad because if he had showed up on time, he would have heard the new message kicking off every call saying, "This call's being recorded." Everyone who showed up on time heard the message, his team heard it, and they had no problem with it. For the next 2 weeks, we recorded everything, every single word of it. One of my audio engineers made a supercut of every terrible thing Baseball Dad said. Every single sweetheart, every single shut the F up, every single no one cares what you think, yada yada yada. My project manager even baited him into repeating what he said about her clothes on a budget call. This time, he literally says to her, "You're so much better at flirting than budget, sweetheart. That's why I like you." This little compilation sounded insane when played all together. It was an incredible piece of evidence. We sent it to his boss and his vice president, and we threatened to walk away from the work 2 weeks before product launch if Baseball Dad wasn't disciplined. They immediately apologized and they begged us not to leave. They said it would be handled by Monday. My one sweet project manager that he had been so gross to got the best part of this revenge. She anonymously sent the supercut to his wife using the email address that she had posted on LinkedIn. I don't know what became of it, but I can't imagine it wasn't good. On Monday, Baseball Dad wasn't on the call. My boss had snooped and found out that he had a few complaints prior, and he got immediately fired after we sent it through. He didn't see vendors as people, so he was shocked that his words towards us counted against his 3-strike policy. And apparently, he melted down completely as he was being fired, so much so that they had to call the police. I wish I could have seen it. I also imagine he came home to a very angry wife as well. Now that was just as well deserved, and it must have been super satisfying to find out that the a-hole got fired immediately. And to think, if the guy made it to the calls on time and actually heard the calls were being recorded, he wouldn't have lost his job and maybe his family. And this next OP also deals with an a-hole who happens to own an auto repair shop. Listen to this post. So this happened a while back, before the internet was a common thing and no one had their own portable phone. A local auto repair shop changed their phone number for some reason, and a few months later, when my family added a second phone line to the house, guess which number we were given? Now, it wasn't that much of a pain since most of the customer base had the new phone number, but about 6 months later, we start getting calls for this business in excess of several times a day. So I finally ask one of the callers where he got the phone number from. He tells me it's on top of the business's building in 3-foot-high letters, and I thought, really? So I drive by that way the next day, and sure enough, there it is in big blue letters. I look up the current number when I get home, and I give them a call. I said, hey, so I've noticed you still have your old phone number on top of your building, and we've been getting a lot of calls, so would it be possible for someone to correct the sign or paint over it? This is where I get told that they don't have time to deal with it, that it's my problem. Click. I just sat there thinking to myself, oh, okay, now I see. So I figure it won't take long to sort this out. If it's my problem, I guess I'll have to deal with it. And you might know where this is going. So with that, I start taking appointments. I tell a lady who called that we're having a special on tires, that I can get her a complete set for $75 since she's a lucky caller today. I get a guy that needs a complete rebuild on his transmission and asked how soon we can do it. I tell him that since we're not very busy right now, if he can come to the shop by noon, I have a guy who can have it done by 6 p.m. the same day, and it'll only cost him like $700, which is super cheap by the way. I do this maybe 20 to 30 times over the course of a week or so. The calls become less frequent, and as I drive by the following week, I notice that the sign's now just plain white. I'm pretty sure that all in all, I cost this guy about $10,000 to $20,000 or so in pissed off customers who all showed up thinking that they had an appointment and a great deal. I'm really good at fixing my problems. So this is a story that's somewhat legendary around the mine site I work at, and I think it belongs here. One of the big bosses around the site decides to be a smartass one day, and he instructed someone a level below him, who we'll call Alan, to save the mine $34 million a year. Now here's what's important. Big Boss said he didn't care how he did it, he just told Alan to get it done, or else he would make sure they lose their job. Now, Alan had been putting up with crap from Big Boss for the past few months. There's a code of conduct and responsibility that needs to be followed, and Big Boss worked very hard to find his way through every loophole possible that stopped him from slacking off. This includes dumping a fair amount of extra work on his employees, but the one in this tale of pro-revenge had it the worst. Big Boss would constantly belittle Alan on the mine radios and dump extra paperwork on him, including his own paperwork. Not only that, but Big Boss made him drive other employees around the mine site when Alan was already swamped with extra paperwork, causing him to lag behind on his other duties that he was supposed to be doing. Alan was no assistant. It wasn't his job to do Big Boss's crap. But if he refused, Big Boss technically could start the process of Alan's termination through some BS loophole. So here's where things get interesting. After Big Boss instructed Alan to save the mine $34 million a year, Alan figured out damn well that Big Boss was trying to kiss the ass of the higher-ups to make himself look godly or something. However, instead of doing the work himself, he's once again dumped it onto Alan. But on this day, Alan had enough. Big Boss goes on vacation and comes back to find a massive, and I mean massive, conveyor line parked up miles away from where it's supposed to be operating, and in the equipment graveyard. Now, if you've never seen a conveyor line, think if a crane and a conveyor belt had an enormous love child. It's been dismantled and sits in 3 enormous pieces. Seeing that, Big Boss flies off the handle. He explodes and he gets onto the mine radios and screams for Alan to get his ass down there. This is when Alan rocks up, and when asked what in the hell he'd done, Alan simply shrugs and says, "I've pulled the conveyor out of production. That'll save you $34 million a year." No matter what Big Boss argued or how much he threatened, Alan simply said, "You told me to save $34 million a year. I did just that." No matter how much money the mine would actually lose with this massive machine out of construction, Alan did as he was told. Of course, the big bosses found out, and when they questioned Big Boss about it, he points the blame to Alan. Once again, Alan stands his ground, and he said he did as he was told. Since it was a huge muck-up, it wasn't long before Big Boss was sacked. He packs up his stuff and he walked out of the gate the same day. Alan still happily remains, stress-free and not to be messed with. You know what? That is totally the Big Boss's fault, because if you give somebody instructions that half-assed and then threaten to fire them if it's not met, don't be surprised when things don't go your way. And for those of you who are wondering how putting that massive machine out of commission saved $34 million a year, OP did pop into the comments to say that that machine costed that much to run annually and then some. So putting it out of commission was the easiest way to get the job done. And this next OP ruins his friend's life for messing with his kids. So I've got this acquaintance who we'll call Richard. He's always had the "I know better than you" personality. And what makes it worse is he has a PhD in physics from one of my country's top universities, so yeah, he's not a dummy. The problem is he thinks that just because he's a physics genius, that means he knows better than everyone about everything. Just an example, my kids are in Montessori schools. That's a decision my wife and I reached together, and we're very happy with it. Well, when he heard, he went on a 30-minute rant/lecture about how we're throwing our money away and Montessori is nonsense. When I told him that there's studies proving the opposite and gave him some real examples, such as Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, etc., he still wouldn't admit that he might not be correct. Now, that's not the subject of this revenge. That's so you understand the person we're dealing with. Another thing to note that's important is that Richard does not have Asperger's or anything similar. We joke about this all the time, and he's been tested from here until next week. He's just a really smart, socially oblivious pain in the ass. So given all the above, I try to limit my time with him. But unfortunately, that's not always possible. And last week, we were both at the same group gathering for a friend who was visiting back home from overseas. who we'll call Jack. I've known Jack since grade school, so we brought our families and made it more than just a long time no see type of thing. At some point later in the afternoon, my eldest, who we'll call Awesome, who's not even 10 years old, came to me really sad, and she said she wanted to go home. When I asked her why, she said that Richard had just spent 15 minutes telling her that she can't eat hot dogs because they're unhealthy. He explained what went into hot dogs and what they're made out of. Now, my daughter Awesome is not a vegetarian. She knows that the beef and chicken she eats used to be live animals, and she's never professed interest in vegetarianism. At the same time, when a kid's eating a hot dog, they don't care or want to know what's inside of a hot dog. We spoke for a bit, and I calmed her down. I told her just ignore Richard and to go play with her siblings and her friends. Being a kid, she's thankfully easily distracted by something else, and she moved on. I didn't want to make a fuss with Jack or Richard, so I just let it be. This turned out to be a mistake, though. About 30 minutes later, I hear Awesome scream and begin crying. So I run over to her, and Richard had come up to her, and he smacked her hot dog out of her hand, saying she shouldn't eat that garbage. I just handed Awesome to my wife for damage control, and I take Richard aside, and I told him that A, you don't ever talk to a man's kids without permission, B, you don't ever teach a man's kids without permission, and C, you sure as heck don't ever touch a man's kids without permission. Now, he doesn't have kids, so I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. This turned out to be a huge mistake. Instead of doing the mature thing and moving on, he decides to double down on this hot dog issue. This was the hill he was gonna die on, that my kids shouldn't be eating hot dogs. Keeping Jack in mind, I disengaged and I told him to stay the F away from my family. For the rest of the time there, I kept my eye on him, and he didn't come near them again. Jack enjoyed his time, we all ate some good meat, end of the story as far as I'm concerned. Again, this turned out to be a mistake. A few days later, we receive a visit from a child protection officer who claimed that we were neglecting our kids, specifically my daughter Awesome. She came in and she saw that while the house could have been cleaner, everything was fine. She then sat down with Awesome for a few minutes and asked her some questions, said that everything seemed fine, and then left. The first thing I did was call up a friend of mine who's a lawyer, just to be on the safe side. He said it looked to him like we were in the clear, but we should keep in touch with him just in case. Next, I began working the grapevine. It turns out that Richard was offended by how I treated him after the hot dog incident, so he filed a false anonymous report on us. Being Richard and never thinking he could ever be wrong, he was even talking about it as if people should be proud of him for what he did. I had to make sure though, so the last thing I did before dropping the hammer on him was confronting him personally. I set my phone to record and went to his house. He doubles down yet again, saying that I was torturing Awesome, that he's the one who called protective services on us, and he would do it again in a heartbeat because he's right. Now, I'm not the violent type, but I swear I wanted to break this idiot in half. I told him if he ever came near me or anyone in my family again, I would have a restraining order out on him, and I would make sure that every single one of our shared acquaintances knew why. I listened to the recording in my car, and his admission that he filed a false police report came out clear as day. I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer, who then said he'll get the ball rolling with some friends of his with the public prosecutor to see if we could get Richard in trouble using his admission. And then I enacted my actual revenge. You see, after he got his PhD, Richard bragged about the new place he'd be moving in as soon as he sold his current place. To that end, he renovated most of his current place, putting in lots of new and expensive features that required lots and lots of electrical work. He did the same for his new place. He did most of the electrical work himself, which is a big no-no unless you're licensed where I live. So I called an inspector on both of his places, who then asked to see the certification on who did all the electrical work. Obviously, there was no certification. It wouldn't surprise me if Richard being Richard, he began arguing with the inspector that his work was good enough and he doesn't need to pay someone else to do it for him. I haven't seen or spoken to Richard since, but I have heard that he had to bring in a certified electrician to examine every single change he made in both of his places. This meant dismantling everything and having it inspected. Turns out the buyers of his old place weren't happy with the delay in receiving the keys, and they were even unhappier when they learned why there was a delay. They walked away from the deal and they're now taking him to court. Because the sale fell through, he's now in the hole paying mortgages on 2 places. I don't know if there's a fine levied against him, but I sure as hell hope so. Yeah, so the lesson of the story here, guys, is you don't ever mess with anyone's kids. And seriously, Richard calling CPS on OP over a hot dog and tried to ruin OP's family, like that was the least OP could have done in retaliation. OP does mention that, quote, if Richard ever decides he wants to start up again, I've got a police report ace up my sleeve, but I don't want to F up his life that bad unless he really makes me do it. Guys, this next OP actually does mess up his cheating ex's life. So this is a throwaway account for obvious reasons. Before I get into the story, I should probably say this up front. I'm not the hero here. This story involves 2 deeply flawed people, and I was definitely one of them. I grew up in a religious household after my father passed away when I was young. I spent most of my teenage years and early adulthood behind a computer. I worked in IT, spent way too much time gaming, and I wasn't exactly the most social person. By the time I was 24 years old, I never had a serious relationship, and then I met my fiancé. My mother introduced us through a Bible study group. She already had a 2-year-old son, but I didn't care. I fell for her almost immediately. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Within 6 months, she became pregnant, and because of my religious upbringing, I proposed right away. And that's when she dropped the first bombshell, that she was still legally married. Her husband was in prison. And honestly, I should have seen that as a warning sign, but I was completely in love and convinced that I could help her leave her troubled past behind. She eventually files for divorce, and we continued building our life together. Once our child was born, I started losing weight, became more social, and I genuinely thought that everything's finally falling into place. And looking back, there were plenty of red flags. She openly admitted that she'd only joined the church because she thought it would look good while dealing with court cases and probation. She insisted on keeping her part-time job even though I earned a comfortable 6-figure income. Not only that, but she seemed to know an unbelievable number of people, but I ignored all of it. And then she became pregnant again, this time with twins. That's when I start thinking about getting a vasectomy. Since we thought we were done having children, I wanted to freeze some sperm beforehand, just in case we changed our minds years later. So I went for the appointment, expecting everything to be routine. Instead, the doctor told me that my sperm count was unusually low. He suggested I improve my diet and then come back. So I did, and the second test wasn't any better. He then starts asking questions. When I mentioned I already had 3 kids, I noticed the expression on his face change. I don't remember much after that. I just remember walking out of the office. I didn't get into my car, didn't call anyone, I just walked. Eventually, I called an Uber and went home. The next day, I start researching infertility, and I convinced myself the doctor had made a mistake. I scheduled a DNA test, and within a week, my entire life fell apart. These children weren't mine. The first person I told was my mother. I sat in her house and I cried for the first time in my adult life. And then, in what was probably the strangest attempt at comforting someone I've ever experienced, she told me a secret that I'd never known. Apparently, I was the product of an affair. Instead of comforting me, that story completely shattered me. My mother insisted that I stay. She told me that I was the only father those children had ever known and that I need to honor my commitment. And I actually considered it for about 24 hours, and then I snapped. I couldn't do it. Every time one of those kids called me dad, it felt like somebody was driving a knife into my chest. I met with an attorney, and I assumed leaving would be simple, but I was wrong. Because our finances were intertwined, and because I'd raised the children, and because we'd spent years and years together, the lawyers explained that leaving wouldn't free me from my responsibilities. I would still be financially tied to the family. So with that, I stopped returning their calls. And then I started making a different plan. I wasn't just gonna leave, I was gonna disappear. I destroyed my passive income streams, and I intentionally got myself fired. I stopped paying bills, and I slowly drained our savings. Since I handled all the finances, my fiancé didn't realize what was happening until much later. For months, I debated whether I even wanted to keep going. At one point, I seriously considered ending everything. Instead, I decided to leave. I told everyone that I was taking a week-long hiking trip to clear my head. I checked into the hiking lodge that afternoon, and 6 months later, I was living under a new identity in a different city. I'm intentionally skipping over details because I have no idea which parts were legal and which weren't. I just rebuilt my life from scratch. But there was one thing I couldn't stop doing. I kept checking my ex's social media, and honestly, watching everything fall apart was satisfying. The money disappeared, the bills piled up, the comfortable life that she'd become accustomed to completely collapsed. And then, about a year after I disappeared, I saw something that caught my attention. She created a memorial page for me. This made me decide that my revenge wasn't quite done, and I decided to call up my brother and let him know I was alive. My brother and I had drifted over the past 10 years, but he was blood and always there for me when I was younger. I told him why I did what I did, and we caught up, and I asked him not to tell anyone yet, and he agreed. According to everyone in my hometown, I was dead. And that's when my brother told me something even crazier. My mother and ex-fiancé were trying to collect my life insurance policy. Apparently, she continued paying the premiums after I disappeared. If the claim succeeded, she would receive a 7-figure payout. I found out when the hearing was scheduled, and then I drove nearly 1,000 miles back to my old hometown. I arrived early, and I sat outside the meeting room. By that point, I had lost 60 pounds, grown a beard, and looked completely different. My own mother walked right past me, and my ex-fiancé did the same. Neither of them recognized me. Eventually, they enter a small conference room with attorneys representing the insurance company. Now, this wasn't the dramatic courtroom scene that I'd imagined. There wasn't even a judge. So I did the only thing I could think of. I knocked on the door and someone opens it, and everyone looked confused. All I said was, "I believe you're trying to determine whether or not I'm dead." My ex recognized me immediately, and the lawyers looked completely stunned. Everything exploded. People start yelling, security showed up, my ex screamed at me and slapped me. The situation escalated so quickly that security ends up putting handcuffs on her. Then, the insurance company's legal team starts asking questions. The police became involved, and then the investigator showed up. At that point, I start wondering whether showing up had been a terrible idea. I give my statement, and I avoid answering questions about where I'd been living. Over the next several weeks, I find myself dealing with one legal headache after another. The police weren't thrilled that I'd disappeared. I end up paying a significant fine. My ex tried to sue me, and my mother helped her. But by then, I had already detached myself from that entire life. I eventually returned to my new city, and I never looked back. I stopped checking social media, stopped following what was happening, and finally, I start focusing on myself. The truth is that revenge did not fix me. Years later, I find out that I wasn't actually infertile. I have a daughter now, and becoming a father to a child that I knew was mine forced me to reevaluate everything. I still don't think I'm a good person. I hurt people, I abandoned kids who thought I was their father, and I let my anger consume me. But I did learn something from all of it. Hatred doesn't disappear just because you get revenge. Sometimes it follows you long after you've won, and that's the lesson I learned the hard way. And with that story brings us to another end of our /pro revenge, guys. That story was wild, wasn't it? If you guys enjoyed today's episode, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/malicious compliance episode where Opie obeys his stupid supervisor and the guy practically destroys his own life. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.